Yo, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be going over Hellfire. We're going to be going over her build, what weapons to use, and my overall thoughts on the character. Before we start, I want to shout out Morph. After I brainstormed a bit on what I wanted to run on the character, I decided to look around to see what other Hellfire builds were looking like, and I noticed this was the only person really talking about it. So shout out to them. Check them out if you haven't already. This guy's been pushing the character as much as they could. Alright, so getting onto the actual character, first let's talk about the skills. Her first ability is a circle that deals periodic damage to the enemies inside of the circle. And the second ability, she deals pyro damage surrounding enemies and taunts them. So it's a big stomp, big huge circle, deals damage to all the enemies around her, and they get taunted. Passive ability increases her match HP and continues to restore HP. So she's constantly healing, always at a high HP bar. She also increases damage to enemies that are taunted and increases attack for herself and pyro allies. Now, the biggest thing about her skills isn't really what they do, more so how they scale. Both of her damaging abilities all scale with damage based on max HP, which means that a higher max HP value is going to deal more damage than just pumping damage stats. That's going to be a big thing when moving on to her demon wedges. Before we get to the demon wedges though, I simply want to talk about the Introns a little bit, because I feel like this character, although a little bit subpar at an Intron 0 level, I do think that this character can and might be insane the more investment you get into the Introns. Probably still not as good as some of the other characters at Intron 6, but the Introns for this character seem rather important. Mainly the first, the fourth, and the last sixth one. So the first one, increased damage dealt to enemies within a 6-meter radius around Hellfire by 30%. So that's another 30% damage bonus, which any damage bonus is good. Intron level 2, it just increases the HP recovery, so you're still tanky, but realistically, I don't think this really does much of anything because you're already very healthy the entire time. So increasing how much HP you heal for doesn't really feel like it matters as much. Plus to skill level, which is always good, but here Intron level 4 is where I think it really starts to help, because decreasing the interval of dealing damage for her regular ability, the huge circle that ticks for damage, down to 1.4 seconds. I mean, it just increases the amount of damage that she's going to be doing, right? Since she's going to be ticking a lot more often, so the overall DPS of that ability is going to go up. By how much, I don't really know. I'm not getting to that point, and I don't know if I plan on farming her to this point, but her damage can only go up from there the more ticks of damage she's able to do. Next is just another couple levels, this time a level 2 levels to Cage of Despair, which is definitely good because you want that skill to be your main damage dealer. And then for Intron level 6, for every 5 sanity consuming skill uses by nearby allies, Hellfire automatically unleashes Cage of Despair, which is the big stomp, and can trigger once every 5 seconds. This is huge, because this essentially gives you one free stomp every 5 seconds, essentially. How much that ends up actually triggering is what I'm wondering, right? Because for every 5 sanity consuming skill uses, I wonder at which point does it start counting? You know, like, is it 5 sanity consuming skill uses and then you stomp and then it doesn't start counting up until it can trigger again? Or does it count before it could trigger again? So let's say it's 5 sanity consuming skills and then it triggers, and then while it triggers, let's say you do the stomp, they use another 5, the next moment it can trigger, it then triggers. I'm not too sure. I'm very interested to see how this Intron works, but either way, more uses of your stomp is just another increase of damage. So by Intron level 6, I have a feeling that this character is going to be really good. However, how good that ends up being, I'm not too sure. I don't know if this will put her on par with other Intron level 6 characters, because when you look at some of the other ones like Lady Nuffle and Lynn, the level 6 just kind of elevates the game by even more. I do wonder how good this is going to end up being. It sounds very interesting, but I will say that at the very least, Intron level 1 and Intron level 4 do seem like good investments. So her checkpoints between Introns on your way to 6 feel like notable upgrades for her damage, which she really needs at the moment. To start with the demon wedges, let's talk about the ones I placed on the left side. These will pretty much always stick with you to the end. I don't really see how these could end up being replaced as you get to golds. Nirvana gives you massive HP bonus, which of course means more damage for this character. Prime Morale, with it giving attack, HP, and morale percent, this basically gives you 3 damage stats in one wedge. Devouring Wildfire gives you extra skill damage and attack percent, and Midnight Sun giving you pyro attack, skill damage, and skill duration. All of these are stats you will need, and these 4 will pretty much stick with you as you upgrade to gold. On the other side, we have the following: 3 Spectrum for HP percent and range, and then Wings for more sanity. The thing about these on the right is that they are most likely going to change. Wings is very easily replaced by Wings Inspo. At the moment, the purple Wings and the blue Wings Inspo that you get essentially run the same rotation for your abilities. You get 1 buff and 2 damage skills off at full sanity. However, the sanity recovery that you get from running something like Serenity on your team, I would say leans into Wings Inspo feeling more comfortable, and Wings Inspo will also outscale regular Wings as you get to Amplified Golds. As for the Spectrum ones, I feel that these, as you get Amplified Gold Spectrum wedges, you won't need to run 3, as 2 golds at max amp will be more than enough extra HP and skill range to cover the stats. Another note about the demon wedges, I have tried using the Blaze Inspo and Blaze Eternity wedges. However, these demon wedges genuinely feel like dead stats, because all you really get is the skill duration or the skill efficiency. The attack percent doesn't feel like it does much of anything for you that the HP percentage would off of the Spectrum, so they feel like pretty dead stats, and these might as well read as just single-lined skill efficiency and single-lined skill duration. These might end up fitting in better once you kind of get to that gold Spectrums, and they might feel better as a replacement if you end up not having to run 3 Spectrum in gold. But if it ends up that multiple Spectrum in gold ends up better anyway, you might never have to use these demon wedges anyway. The only other demon wedge that I would probably suggest is Duel, because Duel is just a really good wedge as a whole, and in the situations that it applies to, it'll give you some extra bonus damage. However, at the moment, I don't feel like putting this in anywhere, because I like the comfort of running Wings or Wings Inspo rather than a little bit of extra damage in Duel. Granted, this character doesn't deal that much damage anyway, so Duel could be much needed extra percentage, but that might be a later problem for me right now, as my goal with the character feels like I just want to have good rotations and good uptime, and I don't think Duel does that for me at the moment. Let's move on to the weapons. For the weapons, it's pretty straightforward that Undying Oneros might be the best weapon for her at this time, giving you max HP percentage, and when this weapon triggers a bonus effect on hit, it grants even more max HP. So it's just damage on damage basically. This weapon is also probably the easiest to get out of her choices, since you can just get it off the shop through the secret letter stuff. I have it at the first smount just because that's how my drops ended up happening, as I bought secret letters for it, but I wouldn't say you necessarily need to invest super hard unless you want to. I'll have the stats up for a +0 version of the weapon, which I think is just max percent +50. So either way, you end up getting extra max percentage, which is really good. You can use some other alternatives like the Punitive Inferno, which gives you max HP +50%, and when a pyro character takes damage, it grants an extra 15% skill duration for 8 seconds up to 3 stacks. This weapon is probably a weapon that benefits as you get more Intron levels, because then you want your circle to last longer, and skill duration ends up being a little bit more worth it. But at the moment, I would still say that Undying Oneros is by far the best weapon. You can run Wayne Wraith if you want for extra skill percent damage, but honestly, it doesn't feel that good. I wouldn't say this is really all that worth putting on her. If it's good if you don't have any of the other weapons and you don't want to run them, or you don't want to farm them, more likely. But yeah, the Undying arrows. Let's get to the demon wedges for this one. Pretty much what you're gonna run is trigger probability, as you want to get the max HP bonuses as fast as possible. So we're running triple tremel, Cerberus Rage, crit damage, and trigger probability. Fenrir's continuity for tremel, combo duration +6, and trigger probability +78%, and just regular tremel another 100% trigger probability. So these three together pretty much kind of max out my trigger probability at 100. You will probably drop one of these as you amplify Cerberus Rage Tremel if you have the gold for it. Since you might not need all that extra tremel as time passes. But this is where I'm at currently. For the other side, I'm running Impetus just for extra attack percent, crit chance because we already have so much extra crit damage off of the Rage Tremel, and Impetus for some more crit chance and some extra attack percent here. So this is my current setup for this build. I think you can run some of the other trigger probability wedges that are like Fenrir's continuity, but I don't have them, nor do I kind of want to prioritize getting to them. So I just don't run them. Honestly, the only real reason I'm running Fenrir's continuity is because I just so happen to have it. But otherwise, I probably would have just been running Cerberus Rage Tremel, regular Tremel, and then like Celerity, honestly, for some extra attack speed. But right now, this is where I'm kind of at, with only one real wedge slot affixed. And this was mainly because I originally had Celerity here. And actually, I could probably run both. No, I can't. Not enough. But it's only really because I had Celerity there first. And then I kind of realized that I should probably have the trigger probability before I put any real priority into attack speed. So I just went straight for 100% trigger probability and removed Celerity. So that's my setup for that. For the next weapon, we went with Express Duo. At this point, I think everybody knows this weapon. You just get some extra percentage of skill damage plus 24%. This is literally just there for that stat stick. Demon wedges are at 0 because I never actually used the weapon and I don't really put anything on it because it's just a stat stick for me. It's pretty much that simple. There's not much to the ranged weapon. The only really thing that matters is between making your melee weapon as good as possible so that you can pretty much be triggering the extra HP percent you get, which will inherently increase your overall skill damage. And with this character, you're going to be mainly using your weapon attacks in between your skill rotations. So you want to actually put some effort into building your melee weapon. But other than that, you don't really need to build the range weapon. Very quickly, let's talk about the supports that I'm running with Hellfire. At this point, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know what supports I'm kind of running, since I haven't really changed my supports all that much. However, because I have a built Lyn, I just run Lyn alongside Hellfire, since she gives an attack boost to herself and Pyro allies of 50%. This is better than one of the options on the other end, which would be Yale and Oliver, who only really gives an attack percent of 40% boost. Granted, again, attack percent isn't really the greatest stat here, and I would probably replace both of them with Tabitha, which we'll talk in a bit. But for Lyn, that's all I'm really running her for. And because she's maxed investment at this point, she's just an extra DPS. So I'm essentially running a dual DPS setup because of how much Hellfire lacks in damage. For her build, it's a pretty standard Lyn build. I went over this build in a little bit more detail on the other video I had about the immersive theater. The only real difference is that you're going to swap the morale for an uplift because I have Serenity on my other support. But with this way, she's going to basically outdamage her own Hellfire. She's, again, only really here for the sake of needing extra attack boost for Pyro allies and the fact that I already had her fully built. Alongside that, I'm going to go towards Truffle and Filbert, since Truffle and Filbert have an overall damage ability. So she'll buff the damage boost as a whole for 75%, which I like a little bit more than other supports who are giving like more direct damage, like attack percent damage. She also increases resolve for herself and allies if two or more characters shared the same element, which in this case my Lyn would. So it ends up working out that way, but Truffle and Filbert, mainly I'm just using it for that extra 75% damage boost here. You can run other supports which give you, attack percent like Margie, but again, I personally don't like attack percent on the Hellfire, as it felt like that buff or that extra percentage in attack percent directly doesn't really help her as much as something else would. If I was to run more direct supports, I would probably remove the Lyn and instead run Tabitha, because Tabitha does give a more direct skill damage percent, which I think Hellfire benefits from more than attack percent. And from what I've seen, Tabitha is actually pretty useful in terms of just overall dealing with waves and stuff like that. So she seems pretty useful. I just haven't really built her because I literally just unlocked her as of the recording of this video. I just unlocked her today, so I haven't really tried her out. I've only really seen her in other videos, not even with just Hellfire, but with other people as well. I think Yellen Oliver is also being used. I believe that's what Morph runs, as I mentioned them earlier, running just an extra attack percent for self and pyro allies. Yellen Oliver looks like they can deal a ton of damage as well, so just pairing up another damage threat alongside Hellfire is definitely needed at the moment. So if you have Yellen Oliver built, I think it's definitely much appreciated extra damage for Hellfire. So he's pretty worth here, especially since it works as essentially another Lyn. So I could imagine running Yale and Oliver, Lyn, and Hellfire and just kind of having a bunch of extra damage, and then everybody's dealing a bunch of burst damage. But at that point, you're running triple DPS. I think right now, with the way Hellfire deals damage, you do kind of need at the very least one other DPS to assist you, because her damage as a whole is not going to stack up all that well compared to some of the other DPSs who can just run double supports and just kill everything themselves. But that's kind of it for the supports options. I didn't really put much thought into the supports for Hellfire, as I kind of already had all these characters built, so I kind of just threw them where I felt they kind of fit, and didn't really fine-tune anything other than changing morale to like uplift or serenity, whatever I needed at the time. Some quick final thoughts for the character as I kind of beat this guy up real quick is that I think this character definitely needs some buffs. The damage to bosses specifically is virtually nothing. We'll see here the majority of the damage that's being dealt is from the Lyn. Granted, this is comparing an I0 Hellfire to an I6 Lyn, but like, I don't think it'd be much different if it was an I0 Lyn. The biggest problem with this character is that she simply just does not deal enough damage in her skill rotation to justify being used over some of the other characters, and it is pretty unfortunate that it exists as such. At the moment, there's no real reason to have a tank character in the lineup, because what are you realistically tanking? There aren't really boss mechanics that require a tank, because everything could either be dodged or just straight up tanked with lower HP values, right? Like, you can still tank some of this with like a 2 to 3k HP unit, because all they need to do is get healed by your assist characters, right? So like, realistically, I feel like as an identity, this character does not really have a place, because tanks aren't really useful here. So I do think they need to swap her out, probably change the way that either she works entirely or make max HP values give a meaningful amount of damage to where she can deal with content the same as some of these other DPS, because right now tanks don't really have an identity. There's no real reason for a tank to exist. So I think they need to shift her more into being a HP scaling DPS rather than an HP scaling tank who gets out damaged by somebody else, right? Like, I think right now the best way to play her is in a lineup with a secondary DPS that makes up for the extra damage that you're missing out on. But unfortunately, at that point, what is the point of running Hellfire instead of just running that other DPS with 2 other supports that buff the damage of that DPS, and that DPS can work by itself essentially as its own single damage dealer, right? I think this character definitely needs a change in identity, because just overall, like I said multiple times already, tanks just don't exist in this game. There's no reason to be a tank in this game. So I think they need to do something about that, and hopefully from there she can become stronger, because right now I don't see a point in investing weekly runs to get her to Intron level 6, because while some of those Introns sound good, I don't think getting her to Intron level 6 is going to be as good as some characters with Intron 0. Like, Psyche does so much more than this character at Intron 1, Intron 2, even probably Intron 0. And I don't see this character outscaling that with mass investment. So, like, do you really want to put time into farming your weekly runs just for this character? Probably not. So, until she goes into the shop, this character is probably not worth investing in too much outside of a base build. And I think that's bad, because you want your characters to be worth building here, right? So those are just my kind of unfiltered thoughts on the way the character works right now. I will probably still invest into this character because I actually really like this character as a whole, aesthetically, and just the kit looks cool to me. So who knows, maybe we'll see what Intron level 6 has in store if I do decide to go that route. But until then, I'm a little disappointed of where Hellfire's at. But if you enjoyed the video, please feel free to follow and subscribe. I'd appreciate it. Checking out on Twitch and do all that good stuff. Thank you guys, and see you on the next one. Probably going to be a Berenica video, so check that out when it comes out. Yeah, see ya.